Okay, and I will call this meeting to order with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And this time I'm going to remember to read my blurb. So Persian of the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A S18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15, 2020. This meeting of the Somerville School Committee will be conducted via remote participation. We will post an audio recording, video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local access government channels, SCAT. So with that, welcome everyone. Welcome back on what actually feels a little bit like a fall night. Our students are not joining us tonight, but they will be with us next week. And because of the Labor Day Monday, we are meeting this Monday and then next Monday. And I will preemptively say that I know that the city's town hall is next Monday. And I did look into moving our meeting back, but that would have conflicted with Yom Kippur. So we are meeting this week and next week, and we are going to go to public comment.
Here, can we take roll? Can we take roll?
That would be great. Thank you for the details, Superintendent Skipper.
All good. Mr. Green.
Here.
Ms. Norman.
Here.
Dr. Ackman. Ms. Krepshin.
Here.
Ms. Barish.
Present.
Dr. Phillips.
Here.
President McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Ms. Pavone.
Present.
Mayor Curtatoni. I think he may be having trouble with his audio, but I know that he is present. So, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being on top of the details. Item number 3 is the public comment. And at the start of each school committee meeting, when there's public comment, the chair always has to read the statement. So speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material. The presiding chair may permit extension of this time. Additionally, the chair may limit comments to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak. Tonight, you will get 3 minutes each. A group of residents appearing at a meeting to express favor or opposition to a particular agenda item is encouraged to designate one member of that group as a spokesperson to be heard on that topic. Other members of the group may be heard if they feel they can contribute additional information on that topic. Improper conduct and remarks will not be allowed. Defamatory or abusive remarks are always out of order. And if a person continues to disrupt, I'm struggling tonight, the meeting after a clear warning, the chair has the authority to order that person to leave. All remarks will be addressed through the chair. The school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor against any member of the school community in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility. Under most circumstances, administrative channels are the proper means for disposition of legitimate complaints involving staff members. And written comments may be presented to the school committee before or after the meeting for the school committee members to review, and we always encourage the public to submit their written testimony. It'll be part of the permanent record. So with that, we have 2 speakers tonight. And when you start to speak, if you can say your name and your home address, please. And so our first speaker is Elizabeth Pinsky.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Elizabeth Pinsky. I live at 27 William Street. You guys should know that if you think your seasonal allergies are worse, you're actually right. And that's because of climate change, more pollen in the air, longer growing season, more carbon. I had to throw that in at the beginning. So on to schools, I just wanted to say that I'm aware that this is a really complex problem. I'm a pediatrician and a child psychiatrist. My lens around all of this is very much about child mental health and development. I did the math today, and it has been over 180 days since in-district young learners with complex special needs have gotten their speech therapy, their behavioral therapy, and their other essential services. And as a pediatrician, I know that when provided early, these are the services that literally change the arc of a child's development. So I'm commenting tonight only to plead that whatever decisions are getting made in the coming weeks regarding the general school population, we can't ask these kids or these families to be patient. It's not a question of convenience or of achievement for them. And if we're not acting with real urgency around that, we know that there are literal lifelong consequences for these kids. So I just wanted to speak on their behalf, and I'm glad that we'll be hearing for CPAC later. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Tim Sackton. Tim, you have the floor. Is he? Tim, are you there?
You are self-muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I live at 20 Wallace Street in Somerville. My name's Tim Sackton. My kids go to the Brown School in 1st and 5th grade. I have 2 specific comments I want to make, but I want to preface it by saying I know everybody's working incredibly hard, including parents, to keep track of all the information that keeps coming out. And I know that the current situation is really difficult, and I know that none of us are going to be perfect, and nothing that happens is going to be exactly, smooth running. But I do want to make a comment about the way that, first about the way that communication has been occurring. And in particular, I feel like information has been changing constantly. Specifically, one recent example is around the sort of after school rec programming. I'm still not clear whether my kid can go to both the paid after school and the free rec program, or whether they conflict. And I feel like that information has, whether they conflict or not, has changed at least 3 times over the course of the past week. I know it's really hard because probably what happened is, in fact, the information did change and parents were told one thing, and then the schedules changed and the details are worked out, and we got told another thing and then another thing. But it's just really hard to keep track of everything and keep everything straight. And I don't know exactly what the solution is. I wish there was some way to think a little bit more about just how to clarify all of this and like the expectations. We get so many emails, and it's a huge amount of effort, and I'm just exhausted just dealing with the scheduling and not even thinking about what the remote learning piece is going to look like. And I wish I had some brilliant solution. I'm just commenting to ask that there be some attention to making it easier for parents to understand what's going on with information changing all the time. Also around things like metrics for when we're returning to school, right? Like, not a timeline for when we return to school, just a timeline for when we're going to know what the metrics are. Again, this sort of keeps changing, and I don't know how to keep track of this all, and getting 15 emails is not great. Just briefly, I'd like to also comment on the attendance policy, which I realize is probably largely not something the district has control over because of DESE rules. But it seems like really impossible for me to guarantee that my 1st grader is going to make it to every Zoom meeting while I'm also working from home doing my job. And I hope that there's some way we can extend some grace to overworked and overburdened parents who are just, doing their best in a really difficult time, and that our kids aren't going to be penalized if we just can't make everything happen, because for working parents, it feels like we're being asked to do the impossible. And I will stop there.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Thank you for that. Superintendent, we will now go on to item number 4, report of the superintendent. Mrs. Skipper, you want to take that away?
Great, absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So to the last callers, to Mr. Saxton's comments, I think we'll address a few of those. So tonight, in terms of the reopening, the goal is to provide some updates. And I do want to just start by saying I appreciate how much information is coming out and how for parents that can be difficult to keep up with. I think the challenge is we are trying our best to give the relevant information. And part of this is trying to coordinate across a number of programs and to do it effectively. So sometimes that does mean something will change, and we try to give timely update to it. I do think that the website is a source to be able to check, so that if parents have missed something on emails, or if they're finding that the email updates are difficult to keep up with, that they can go to the website and find the most current information. So I will talk tomorrow with Ms. Morgan and just ask to make sure that the website does have the most current information on it, and that can be kind of a one-stop shop. The other thing is parents can always reach out to us directly. They can reach out to the principals, or they can reach out to Assistant Superintendent Mazza, or myself, or Dr. Curley, if they're ever confused and need to kind of sort or think through with us. So that's the other thing. Hopefully we're pretty responsive on those. So I'm going to start before we get into the reopening update. We typically do is do some introductions as new administration joins us, new leaders, and tonight I have Dr. Cobbs from the Healy to do an introduction, as well as Principal Vlagambina to do 2 introductions. So with this, Dr. Cobbs, if I could ask Ms. Santiago to unmute you and put your video on. And if I could ask Les Larson. That was an echo.
Good evening. Good evening. Hope you can hear me. Hope you all can hear me.
We can hear you, Les. If you wanted to turn on your camera so we can see you, that would be lovely.
And then Les, we're going to have Dr. Cobbs start.
Okay.
So Dr. Cobbs.
Hi, good evening, Superintendent Skipper, Chairwoman Normandy, and entire committee. Welcome back to the school year. I'm on the move and being presently traced by a 6-year-old wielding a lightsaber, so I'll make this short and sweet. It really is with great pleasure that I introduce my friend and colleague, Mr. Leslie Larte, who's joined our administrative team effective July 1st, but is certainly no newcomer to the City of Somerville, nor is he a newcomer to the Somerville Public Schools. Mr. Larte can speak a little bit about his experience and his valuable contributions to the City of Somerville, beginning as a successful student in the Somerville Public Schools. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce him. This is definitely a very interesting time to make your maiden voyage into school-based administration, or to anything for that matter. But he has done so with grace and humility, and I'm very happy to introduce him. Mr. Larte.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Cobbs. I have to apologize to everybody. My system will not allow me to turn my camera unless I reboot it, and I'm not going to do that. So it's a pleasure to be with you all, and it's an honor. Superintendent Skipper and the whole committee, I should say, when I look at the screen, apologize for this opportunity to join Dr. Cobbs at the Arthur D. Healy School. It's an amazing community. Like Dr. Cobbs is saying, I'm a student. I'm an individual who was a student in the Somerville Public Schools and matriculated from literally about grade 3 through Somerville High School. Different time, different era, but also a challenging time and era in a different way than we have now. I'm pleased to be a part of the leadership community at the Healy and working with the students who I can definitely appreciate and connect with some of their experiences as they grew up in Somerville. And that's coming from across many socioeconomic backgrounds and a very diverse setting. This chance and this opportunity is something I know comes with a great deal of responsibility and a great deal of opportunity, including the specific moment that we're in now. And as I told Dr. Cobbs, it's not just Somerville, but the world in my life has conditioned me to be able to handle situations and think about the social emotional well-being of individuals so that we can actually all aspire to achieve the professional aspirations we have, and that's just as adults and as students. So start first by our well-being, and I feel well. I know it's a challenging time for not just myself, but for all of us in many different ways, including the parents who just spoke about what they're encountering and what everybody else is managing. But it is an intriguing time, and it's gonna make us tougher, and we're gonna get through it. And on the opposite end of this, I guarantee we'll be able to handle other situations because of what we go through now. So I really do I appreciate this opportunity, and I'm sorry, like I said, once again, for not being able to turn my camera on, but I will see you all, and you will all see me for sure.
Well, you know, in these very, very trying times, every bit of good news is so welcome. And Les, you becoming, taking this leadership role is such good news. I've known Les, well, you know the school system better, right, since third grade. I met Les but when you were at the Healy the first time, I don't know how many years ago that was, and have watched your career blossom, and you work so hard. Then I got to see you over at the West, and now you're in this leadership thing. But what I will say about Mr. Larte is not only does he care about the students in the buildings, there are some that he and I both care about, and he sees them on the street, and he finds them outside. You know who I'm talking about. And what Les does day in and day out is that beautiful balance of compassion and accountability for kids. And I am so thrilled for all of us, but I'm especially thrilled for the Healy to have such a strong leadership team with the two of you there now.
I appreciate the words, Ms. Norman. Thank you so much. And while I have the opportunity, from Mr. Green to Mr. Mazza to obviously Superintendent Skipper, Ms. Ackman, Ms. Patone, those that I know, and I see some believed in me and believe in me, and I don't take that lightly. So I 100% wouldn't be where I am without people supporting me, people from many different walks of life. But in this immediacy, it goes a long way. So I know we have a lot of hard work ahead, and I really do appreciate each and every one of you being people that listen. Doesn't mean you hear what you want to, but you do listen and you give feedback and allow processing. So that is an immense part of my personal growth, and that's some of the skills and abilities I hope to pass on to our students, because we don't always get what we want, but we're all trying to get to the best that we can be. So I appreciate you all. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We'll
you.
have to get you all kinds of Healy Hawk swag. Get you all to Superintendent.
Hold you to that.
Superintendent, who else do we have tonight?
We have Principal Lagambina. And Principal Lagambina, would you like to unmute and put your video on? Do some introductions?
Yes, but first I want to congratulate Les. Les was a former student of mine, my chemistry class here, and I was proud of him as a student, and I'm even more proud to call him a colleague these days in the administration. So congratulations, Les. I look forward to working with you. I know I've been working with you for a number of years now, but I just want to say how proud I am as a former teacher of yours. I love to see the students of Somerville get involved in the Somerville Public Schools, just like I did, and just like you're doing. So congratulations. And I know you're going to take Somerville to the next level. So thank you
very much. Thank you.
And so we have tonight, we have Sean Callanan. Sean is the assistant principal, director of CTE. Sean has 28 years in the voc technical education area. He started off as a drafting CAD teacher in Woburn High School. From there, he went on to Minuteman Regional Voc Tech as a pre-engineering and an architectural design teacher. He was also department head and STEM coordinator at Northeast Metropolitan Regional Voc High School. And most recently, he was the director of EdCo Collaborative Academy for Career Pathways, where he launched the state's first transitional career pathways program to target at-risk youth between the ages of 18 and 22 years of age. And I just want to welcome Sean. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sibby. Thank you, Superintendent Skipper. I'm really grateful to be in Somerville. I've embraced the community, the culture, the the support systems that I've received. And I just wanted to let you know how grateful I am for that. Our staff is committed to doing everything we can to support our students through this unprecedented time. So we're reaching out more clearly and more often to our families and parents. And so I wanted to let you know that we're taking care of the whole students, not just the CTE student, but, you know, socially, emotionally, academically, and otherwise. And not just the students, but also the teachers. We're doing everything we can to support them. And we're finding that this Zoom anxiety is real. They're going minute to minute. And so we've been backing off a little bit to give them more free time to set up for their classes. But like I said in my letter to the parents and families, the buildings are closed, school is not closed. We're open, we're excited. We're excited to get the students in our classes, and we look forward to Friday coming. But I just wanted to thank you for the immense amount of support that I get. I mean, I talk to Sibby and a number of you daily, and I really appreciate having that opportunity to do such.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I just want to jump in. I met Sean during the in-person graduation, which was 13 of the most fun hours I've ever had. And I met him, and I had no idea who he was, but he was in there and helping and organizing and, you know, the air traffic controlling parents and cars. And so, you know, your first impression was someone who just jumped in and joined the community and got whatever needed to be done. So welcome to our community, and especially into CTE, which had a particularly difficult year last year, losing Leo DeSimone. So we welcome you and the kindness and humanity, along with your professional expertise, will be very much appreciated.
Thank you, Terry. One quick thing. I was fortunate enough to work with Leo back in the early 90s at Minuteman and through late 90s. So I bring a lot of him with me. And I was fortunate enough to have him as a friend and a boss, a mentor, somebody I reported to. So that connection is something that, you know, I'm trying to be very sensitive to, because I know there was a great loss there firsthand. But thank you.
Well, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Sean brings a lot of enthusiasm and energy to the team, so we're happy to have him on board. So next is Paul Cooley. Paul most recently worked for Education First EF College Study Tours as Director of Institutional Partnerships, where he developed study abroad program and service learning programs for colleges and university. Before that, he was at the Promise Academy 2 Middle School in Harlem's Children's Zone in New York, and he was at the Academy of Urban Planning High School in New York as well. Welcome, Paul.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you, Sibby. Thank you, Superintendent Skipper. Thanks, committee. I am excited to be here. I actually lived in Somerville a little over 20 years ago. I'm a graduate of Tufts University, so it's really exciting to be back. I lived the last 20 years in Los Angeles and New York City. So I started off as a basketball coach and then a phys ed teacher, and then a school counselor, a college counselor, and then the most recent school, I was an assistant principal at Harlem Children's Zone. And from that, I learned that every child can succeed, and I'm excited to do whatever it takes. Put the energy in for whatever it takes to make sure that that happens. And right now, it's a tough time. But it's during those tough times that we build resilience and build community. And I'm really proud and happy to be a part of Somerville and to take part in that and to really make a difference. And thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited about this school year and to make a real impact. So thank you.
Oh, welcome. You bring a ton of experience, new perspective. It's interesting. We have someone who hasn't lived in the city for 20 years. And a Somerville grad, and both joining our leadership team. I have a fondness for your house. My kids bring up the rear of every alphabetical order with ZRA at the end. So I look forward to having conversations with you as a parent, not in this formal setting as well. And you are very lucky to have Ms. Francis. I cannot say enough.
Yeah, she's great. Absolutely.
So welcome.
Yep, thank you. Paul brings a lot of experience and leadership to the high school, so we're happy to have Paul on board.
Thank you so much.
Great, congratulations to both of you. So each meeting, we will introduce a few new admin as a way to be able to sort of highlight and welcome aboard. But tonight was great. Thank you to both Dr. Cobbs and to Principal Lagambina for also taking the time tonight to come here. So Chair, I would like Director Vieira is on, our athletic director, and I'd like him to just update the committee on some of the most recent events that have happened with the GBL relative to our athletics and what our plan is for the remainder of the year. So Stan, I see you on. Can you hear us? Great.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Absolutely. Good to
Thank you.
see you.
Good to see everyone, and thank you very much, Superintendent Skipper, for having me tonight. I'll just give you just a kind of an update and what's happened, what transpired over the last several months with the constant meetings and guidelines and everything else that we've talked about over the last so many months. Regretfully, we actually have decided to push fall sports over to the newly created MIAA Fall 2 season. It's technically called the floating season. And the MIAA has basically said they're giving fall teams two options. You can play currently, starting on September 18th, with low and moderate risk sports. Those would be field hockey, cross country, golf, and the soccers. But we had an additional obstacle. Two of our 5 schools in the Greater Boston League were in the red, designated red communities. So they were not able to participate in any kind of sports. So because of it, after long meetings, talking with our mayors, particularly Mayor Curtatone, and trying to figure out if there was any way around that, we regretfully came to the decision that there wasn't. And so we're pushing forward with the Fall 2 season for all of our sports. Again, it was a consensus for the whole GBL. The one thing we wanted to make sure was we were staying strong and true to the safety of our kids, but also we wanted to make sure we were unified as a league as well. That was really important to us. So we're pushing everything to the Fall 2. I've been working with Superintendent Skipper to put together a conditioning program for all of our fall sports teams. The idea now, along with obviously meeting all of our guidelines, is to have a centralized conditioning option for all of our kids that would start either end of September, 1st of October, and to be centralized over at Dilboy Stadium. And the idea would be staggered. Teams would come in one way, leave a separate entrance, with time in between each conditioning for each team, working with our coaches in cohorts of 10, and making sure we're sanitizing, and again, following all EEA and CDC guidelines. I think it's an important thing to make sure our kids are conditioning. As many of you know, and I'm sure many of you who are parents have children who in many cases has done very little as far as physical activity over the last several months. We want to make sure our kids are ramping up their workouts and they're doing it properly and safely to make sure they're prepared for what hopefully will be their season come end of February, early March. Don't even get me talking on the fact that we might have soccer sometime in early March in New England. It's going to be a very brisk, probably very cool season for all of our kids. There are other challenges as well. But the hope is that when the time comes that we'll have additional time over the next several months to hopefully, whether it's a vaccine, more therapies, better testing, to hopefully be in a better place to help support and do it in a much safe environment for our kids later on. So I'm open to any questions, any concerns, anything you want to talk about.
I'd love to jump in. Well, first of all, thank you for navigating this, right? It talked about ever-changing set of variables and different sets of guidance or lack thereof from some of the state organizations, and I'll leave it there. Can you, and I applaud you for coming up with the conditioning for the fall. What we know is so important. Physical health is so important to mental health, and also it's a way for especially our high school students to be able to see each other in controlled situations, but that interaction is so important. My question is for students, the 2 or 3 season students, you didn't mention winter season, but how are will kids have to decide, or how is that gonna, I mean, and I know a lot of this is dependent on the virus, but has there been some thought given to the students who play more than one sport?
Yes, I'm glad. It's a great question. Thank you for asking. The MIA has taken that under consideration. So the way that the seasons are going to be essentially split up is we'll have our winter season. Typically, it starts end of November, so we have that time frame in place. And the idea is that they're going to all leagues will have a league-only schedule. So right now, there's really no possibility of us having an MIA tournament. And the reason behind it is they feel like it will just go too long. And the one thing they want to do is they want to keep the seasons very short and keep kids very safe. So the idea here is winter will happen over a course of 2 months. It's essentially the end of November, but really it's early December and January. That floating fall 2 season will happen at the end of February into April, and then the spring season will be May, June. They've talked about a little bit of a July. That might be a little bit of a challenge, but essentially it's 2 months. And I think the nice thing about what the MIA has put out is that they're giving students the opportunity to play all sports. And it's actually, I think, a great thing. And doing it in a way that still allows us some time in between for students to recover from their past sports. The other issue, or the other thing that they're contemplating now is the possibility of students playing 2 sports in 1 season. And essentially what they're talking about is it would only apply for students who are doing, let's say, a more taxing sport and a less taxing sport. So the idea or the concept would be, for example, if you're a spring athlete and you're a baseball player, could you potentially play golf if golf is pushed to spring? You know, even though golf is a fall sport and we have that fall floating 2 season, I think we all know that playing golf at the end of February or sometime in March in New England is just not going to happen. So there's conversations about moving golf to the spring. So because it's not as taxing and because games are going to be held essentially just once a week, the idea is, could students potentially play 2 sports in 1 season? And that conversation is actually very real and very legitimate. And I think that's an opportunity for our kids to do more. So, and do it again in a very safe way. So they've ramped up their workouts. It's not as taxing as it would be during a normal, 3-4 games a week season. So those are some of the things that they're trying to put in place to allow students to participate in all seasons and potentially in multiple sports.
Thank you for that answer.
Of course. Yeah, please.
I just want to say to some of my colleagues, I think that I just got this message, bandwidth is a lot. If 1 or 2 of you, or some of you could turn off your cameras and see if that helps a little bit.
Yeah, Norman, I believe the mayor would like to also speak about the sports issue.
Oh, please jump in. Right now, your visual is frozen. I can't see you. So, Mayor Curtatone?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I want to thank Stan Vieira. He's been one of the leaders on taking on this issue amongst the athletic directors and all the school districts. So I can't thank him enough. For context, for those who don't know, I've been involved in high school and youth athletics for over 30 years and had my run-ins on behalf of kids with the MIAA when I was practicing law and coaching sports here in Somerville. I'll say for the record, they're the worst governing body for interscholastic sports I've ever met, ever dealt with, and I'm not shy about saying it. That being said, this is a complex situation, and Stan alluded to this, again, elementary map that we all know the Commonwealth is using at the same breath to guide you whether or not you should open schools, based on the number of cases per 100,000 population in your municipality, or whether your kid should be allowed to play youth sports. So for those that don't know, when Stan says, those are red communities, meaning you have more than 8 cases in a 14-day period per 100,000 population, you're red and it's risky to play sports. But what people don't realize or forget is that they're still allowed to play youth sports under the youth sports rules that the Commonwealth has laid out, which is really just counterintuitive. I think it's a scarlet letter for these kids in these communities. I think it's absurd. It's 2 different ends of the spectrum using an extreme. That being said, it is the prudent move to go to that true sports season and think about how we get our kids in conditioning shape, not just to get ready for sports, but to heal their minds and their bodies and to give them the support they need to break away from all the stress and trauma that we're all experiencing. This doesn't come out without consequences because there are some really good athletes at Somerville High who are going to be missing opportunities for college scholarships. Stan mentioned soccer, so I'll say that because as teams, and I would dealt with recruiting, at girls softball level, at football over the years, and I'll say colleges that are looking for soccer players, they're building their teams up and they'll know by March what communities and what kids they're going after. So sadly, and hopefully, we can continue to work together to get these kids showcased, the boys and girls at Somerville High and other districts in the GBL, so that they get opportunities for real money scholarships to universities because they've worked hard at it. So, you know, I've been trying to give some support with all the other mayors to the ADs and the school districts and providing some other avenues for kids to participate in sports, maybe where they can showcase themselves, you know, throughout the fall months in a safe way. Again, youth are allowed to participate in youth sports in Massachusetts. We have youth sports guidelines. Those guidelines, you know, that map of red, yellow, green, and white communities doesn't apply to that level of sports, which is absurd because you can be playing youth sports at 18 and under age all the way down. So again, but this is the reality we're faced with, and I think the GBL made the right call, and Stan has led this, and we'll continue to help them out.
Thank you, Joe. And I'm sorry, Mary, were you going to say something? I apologize.
No, you're okay.
I just want to, and I said this last time, and I really just want to say this publicly to make sure everybody truly understands the way I feel about this. I can't speak to other communities and other cities, but I truly publicly want to say that you'd be hard pressed to find anybody as supportive and as much as a resource as Superintendent Skipper and Mayor Curtatone. When I tell you they're literally a text message or a phone call away, they've been so critical to not only the success of our program, but also to my first year at Somerville High School. So I just want to make sure I reached out and said, thank you so much for everything you do for our city, for our kids, and for our community.
Well, Stan, I also want to thank you. I mean, you came in your first year, you didn't have athletic facilities, and we had students all over, and this year we have a pandemic. So I'm hoping the third year, your third year with us is a charm, and it's I wish you a very boring year next year. I hope it's that you have stepped up to these challenges, always keeping the kids focused and trying to be as innovative as possible, because for so many of our kids, athletics, it's much more than just that game, and you know that it really is about taking care of the whole child, and it's about health. So I appreciate not just your diligence, but you have managed to keep a sense of humor through some incredible circumstances. So
I appreciate it. And before I sign off, thank you again for the opportunity. And please, I mean it when I tell you, feel free to call me or email me. I'm very quick on communication. If you have any questions at all, no matter how small, how big, I'm always available to answer them.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Chair Norman, we're going to transition now to some of the ops and the academics, and I'm going to ask Dr. Curley to join us on screen, as well as Mr. Gorski and Ms. Bertaldo. Great.
Welcome.
So I'm going to ask Dr. Curley to just start and talk a little bit about the community schools component that Mr. Saxton spoke about earlier. I would just ask if the committee has any questions pertaining to either finance or enrollment.
And I will say to my colleagues, if you have a question, if you want to pop your camera on, or I think we're doing well with bandwidth now. Okay. And so I just see there's a bunch of questions. Ms. Phillips, was your question for Mr. Vieira, or is it for one of the people now joining, one of the staff now joining us?
Mr. Vieira, I'll reach out to him after. No worries.
You know what? He's still with us. I'm sorry. That was my, Stan, are you still there? Can you, Ms. Phillips, can you ask the question, please? Oh, you are muted.
As a former competitive swimmer, I really appreciate everything that you're doing to try to get kids into sports. And I know this pandemic is making planning really hard, but I'm wondering what will happen if we get to November and 2 of our GBL communities are still in the red? Is there a winter 2, or what are we thinking?
Is Mr. Vieira still with us?
I'm not sure. I think he may have logged off.
Oh,
I
I'm
can-
sorry, Ms. Phillips. Okay, so that is a great question. We will get him, we will
yes.
get that to him.
I believe that they're taking it one step at a time. I don't think that they have necessarily addressed this particular issue, although I'm sure it's on people's minds as to what the accommodation could be. So we'll have him follow up directly with you, Dr. Phillips.
Thank you. And Ms. Barris, did you also have a question for the athletic director? Or is your question for someone now joining us?
I did have a question for Mr. Vieira, but likewise, I can send an email via the superintendent. It's not urgent. Thanks.
And I apologize for that. I will keep my eye on the questions being raised. Sorry. Superintendent Skipper, you were presenting Dr. Curley.
Yes. So I wanted to first to say Dr. Curley has done an amazing job. It's a very complex thing in us trying to expand a lot of the programming to serve as many students as possible in these conditions. And that means that oftentimes it's difficult to get exactly what folks want. But we're trying our best and we're not done. We'll continue to evolve it. But it's also working across agencies. And so just a shout out to REC and to community schools for being flexible and working with us to develop the programming, and for Dr. Curley, who continues to try to evolve it to have a positive impact on as many students as possible. So Dr. Curley.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper and Chair Norman. Just a brief update, and I'll try to address some of the questions that were raised or comments today, and then happy to take questions from school committee. So the recreation and community schools registrations opened this morning. There were some hiccups with the registration department registration process. The rec department registration process. Those got ironed out around 11, and I apologize for parents that may have experienced confusion there. All of the sites and spaces are still open, and we are continuing to do targeted outreach to principals and through our SFLC partners to make sure students, particularly underrepresented students, have access to the programming. Parents and guardians should continue to sign up and reach out this week. The registration will remain open for both community schools and for REC. A reminder, the programs are obviously weather permitting. The tents, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Tents are going up around the city, as people have probably seen. Those will offer us some relief, but we will have to keep an eye on the weather. Lunch and snack, as has been mentioned, will be provided through food service. So we will have food service sites open at all of the K-8s and the Brown, as well as all of these programs to serve food. I know there's been confusion about the communication and the schedule and the cohort system, and I'll try to take those on. I understand that as an administrator and as a parent, deluged with a lot of changing information, and I'll try to explain the complexity of it. It may not make it easier for folks at home, but at least you'll understand kind of what we're working with here. So in terms of schedules, and this was mentioned a bit earlier, the outdoor programming and the staffing obviously have to be designed around the school schedules, which themselves had to be bargained and weren't set finally until last week. So there's a dependency there that we had to kind of work through. We also have to we had to figure out how to merge it with the existing community schools after school program, which had almost 700 students already registered and paying to attend. And then, you know, if you've really been following along at home closely, you know that the State Department of Education has given quite a lot of shifting and varied guidance along the way. And so we've had to react in some cases to changes in what the state's telling us we can do. I offer all that not as excuses, but just to explain that there are challenges in designing this kind of new programming that we have to work around. The questions on the cohort system, I know, are also the bane of many parents' existence. Just as a reminder, we're trying to design a system that will allow us to more seamlessly return students in person without further messing up schedules down the line. So students in cohort A will return to in-person school on Monday, Tuesday, but they could be enrolled in rec or community school programming on Thursday and Friday. Vice versa, students in cohort B would be returning to school on Thursday or Friday, and they would attend rec or community schools on Monday or Tuesday. We'll try to post more information to make this clearer. I know it's complicated and a little bit confusing, but I just want to explain the reasoning for that if I can. So one reason is the pre-K and K students are going to community schools from 12:30 to 2:30. And obviously when we go back into school, they couldn't continue to go to that programming. It would conflict with the regular school day. So we had to alternate the schedule for those students so that they could have 4 days of programming and it wouldn't conflict. The other reason is more of a judgment call. So we really wanted to maximize the number of students that had access to safe, social, and peer interactions. And this system, we hope, will allow students to return to 2 full in-person days of school and have 2 additional days of in-person enrichment. So it's a slightly more normal full week of school for students in the system when we go back. I understand that maximizing that kind of access, in this case, it does conflict with the goal of extended childcare, and that is a particular challenge for families, working families, single parents and guardians, especially people with young kids. It is an equity call to try to get as many students access as possible. It's compounded by the challenge of trying to keep students safe and keep them 6 feet apart and utilize as much schoolyard and park space as we can across the city. So I say all that as also a parent of a first grader and a pre-K-er and a baby, and I know how rough it is to manage all those things right now. But I want to just explain to the governing body and to the public kind of why we made some of the decisions we made and why some of the decisions shifted along the way. Again, the programming is there, it's set, it's open for registration. We encourage people to continue to sign up. And we're grateful to our Parks and Rec partners, to community schools, to the communications department, where there are great staff that have helped us communicate all of this out. And we'll continue to try to do it to the best of our abilities. And that programming will begin this coming Monday, the 21st, across all of the sites.
Can you just give the committee and the public a sense of how many students each of the programs will be serving?
Sure. So the existing community schools program, as I said, already had about 700 students enrolled. The Parks program, Parks and Rec, is going to take nearly 450 students in their programming, and then community schools is adding, I think it's close to 225 students in their program. So I can't add all of those numbers up on the fly with my camera on, but that's where we are with this additional programming.
Great. And again, with a lot of priority for the pre-K to 2 grades. So, thank you, Dr. Kirk.
Ms. Krepchen has a question for you, and then Dr. Phillips.
I do. Thank you for that. My question is just a clarifying question and perhaps a request that may or may not be possible. So from what I read about the rec department registration, if I'm assigned cohort A, I'm supposed to register for cohort B so that my kid is attending on Thursday and Friday. Am I understanding the logistics correctly? Like that, so it feels like it might have been easier if the rec department just asked me, what cohort am I assigned at SPS? and then told me, therefore your kid is going to school X days. So it sounded like there might have been some confusion about calling it cohort A and cohort B and actually mean the opposite of what you were assigned at SPS, if I'm understanding it correctly. And so I'm wondering if there is any easy way on the back end to double check that people are really assigned to the days that they're supposed to be assigned to before the program starts.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, that's a great point. And that the intention of the registration on both sides was to just say, tell us what your SPS cohort is, and we will we'll sort it out. You should just have one cohort. It should be A or B. If you don't know, we will figure it out for you. If you enter it correctly, we will also figure it out for you. I apologize that it is a confusing registration system, and there's multiple registration systems here at play. But if you know your cohort, just use your SPS cohort. If you don't, just say you don't know, and we'll figure it out for you. And we will sort the schedules out and try to communicate that back out to parents individually.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Phillips?
Thanks. Dr. Hurley, I really appreciate everything you and your team are doing. This is a really hard job and you're doing it really well and you're trying to make it equitable and I really appreciate it. And just for the studio audience listening at home, can you repeat for us publicly, if you signed up for community schools after school, not the enrichment programming, but the after school, what days do your kids get to go in person? Sorry, and it's not a test. If you want, you could get back to us. That's okay too.
Did we just lose Dr. Curley?
We did just lose Dr. Curley.
It actually looks like
I don't even see him. Yeah, I think he is.
Could I just request that that information go out in the weekly email this week? I've heard a lot from parents who are confused about.
This is the after school program.
Yeah, they get that they're supposed to sign up for the enrichment program on the days their kids aren't in school, but what about the after school?
Yep, got it. Okay. I'll get that answer for you now. Okay, so we also have Mr. Gorski and Ms. Pataldo here. And so
I'm just going to jump in. Ms. Patone, is your question, who is your question for? Was it for Dr. Curley?
Yes, so if you want me to hold it or I can state it. And
can you state it and we'll work on it?
Sure. I had received some questioning from a constituent about kind of schedules and transition times for programming after school, particularly when kids go in person. I'm sure there's going to be some follow-up communication because if school goes till 2:30, how do they go to after school? You know, so I'll just leave it there.
I can answer that. I mean, the expectation is that they get there as soon as they can. For some students, you know, it's a 2-minute walk because they're on the location that where they live. In other cases, it's longer. The program will start for them when they get there. There's no penalty to it whatsoever. So they should finish their school day and then they should head over.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Curley, welcome back.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties in my household. Can I answer Ms. Phillips' question, or has that been answered?
No, it has not. Go ahead, Dr. Curley.
Okay. Yep. So again, just to repeat, your SPS cohort is your SPS cohort. You just have one. If you're in cohort A, you would come back in person Monday and Tuesday, and you would have community schools or rec programming on Thursday, Friday. And if you're in cohort B, you would come back in person for school on Thursday, Friday, and you would have community schools or rec programming on Monday or Tuesday. And again, that is to try to recreate as much of a normal full week of in-person school interaction as possible.
Dr. Phillips, does that answer your question, or was your question more specific about the regular after school?
Yeah, so that's helpful helpful to remind all our families. And then let's add the layer, you signed up for community schools after school, not the enrichment program. If you're in cohort A, what day do you go to community schools after school, not the enrichment?
Yep. So it'd be the same. So for instance, let's take a kindergartner in cohort A. That student would come back on Monday, Tuesday for a full day of regular in-person school. They would be eligible to go to community schools from 12:30 to 4:30 on Thursday or Friday. Does that make sense? So cohort A in the after school would always be Thursday, Friday. Cohort B in the after school would always be Monday, Tuesday. And again, that's especially for the youngest learners, extend that amount of in-person enrichment and interaction time as much as possible. But I recognize it's confusing, and again, it goes to that point that we were building programming on top of existing programming and trying to figure that out within the DESE learning guidelines. Does that make sense? I think one thing we can do is try to get a visual calendar out for folks on the site to explain a block. I know there's been one that's been bouncing around that a parent created, but we could put something similar to that up just to help explain where and when your student would be eligible to attend in-person programming.
Ms. Barish, I see that you have a question. Is it for Dr. Curley as well?
Thank you. Yes, just a quick follow-up to confirm with Dr. Curley through you, Madam Chair. That would mean then that if your student is enrolled in community schools after school, they would not be able to participate in the recreation department enrichment programming unless potentially they're in the oldest age group, because I think that would start after community schools is over. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So I think we have this challenge particularly for grades 1 through 5, right? Where if you're in community schools, your ability to participate in rec programming, you'd have to choose, essentially. We can look at that. Again, I'm hesitant to communicate out more complexity here, but it is something we're aware of. One thing we'd like to do is take the recreation and the community schools enrollment lists and see the extent to which that's a problem for families. But it is currently a challenge for families. If they're in community schools, they would not, their rec time would be at the same concurrent time for that group of grades.
Thank you for that. Ms. Krepshin, you had a comment?
I did, thank you. I just wanted to, just thinking about what you just laid out with the after-school program and thinking about how parents who are signed up for the after-school program traditionally are really signed up for that because of the necessity of the after-school time for working, because they're working, right? Separate from what we're trying to offer with the rec program, which really is a few hours of time for kids to get together and engage in activities together outside. So I'm just wondering if it's too late in this process to think about switching what you just said and having after school be on the same days that you're in school so that parents actually get that full work day, and then those kids could be involved in the enrichment program on those other days potentially. Does that make sense? And it may be too late to rethink this. That's what I was thinking about as you described which days after school those kids would be involved in.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think we can take a look at it. So the community school staff is obviously involved in both sets of programming. And so we need to make sure that we could do that from a staffing perspective too.
Okay.
But I think it's fair. I understand the tension here between kind of extending multiple days to a full working day for parents and offering students a chance to interact on a greater number of days.
It just feels like the after-school program serves a slightly different function than the rec program, partially because it's a paid program versus a free program. But again, I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion.
Yep, I think it's something we'll take a look at, and if it doesn't seem like it's going to further blow parents' minds, we can try to make an adjustment here.
Sure, I understand that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Green has a question for you. Mr.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, yeah, the other thing is that, you know, we're also actively talking with other partners to see what other kinds of options we can develop for students. And so, you know, I think we can certainly take a look at that. We also had a lot of parents say that they want kids doing something each day as opposed to one longer day or 2 longer days. So there's sort of a lot of different kinds of needs that are happening in the community that we're trying to respond to. So we'll certainly look at it. I would say right now, people should do what has been given to them or plan for that. And then if something else materializes, Dr. Curley can advise on that. Same with community schools, because I don't want people holding up their planning based on a theory that something could or could not materialize. But we are also looking at what kind of other partners we might be able to bring in that could help to fill some of the time gap for parents.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Yeah, so let me start by saying, obviously, there's no good solution. With 5,000 families with very different needs, every possible solution is gonna work terribly for some family. And so during remote, I think we just gotta do what we can and just kind of roll with it. I am thinking ahead to when we start actually having the hybrid, right? And in particular, the future of the paid programming when that happens. And the sign-ups for that, right? We will sign up for that in spring when we had 3% unemployment in Massachusetts. Now we have 12% unemployment. People will have very different working from home, not working from home, very different lives than they did 6 months ago when we did sign up for the paid program. So my question is, given that reality and given that people's needs for childcare have changed dramatically, will we be allowing people to either get up their spots or sign up now if they need it now they didn't 6 months ago? Like, how are we adjusting for different parent needs?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, Dr. Curley, I have my thoughts ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and my hope is we can continue to grow the space and the outside providers and the options that are available to increase the seats. I mean, there's a good news, bad news here that at least we maximize space and we haven't filled everything, and we're still able to do targeted outreach and reach more families. We're also looking at other community partners that do great programming and seeing if they could support this as well. Because I think, as we've seen with food service and food insecurity, you're right to point out the needs are going to change, and we don't want something fixed in stone that may not meet the needs of our community a few months down the line.
Yeah, that's similar to what I was going to say. I mean, that, and I think, just ensuring that, for the paid portions with community schools, that, our hope is to be able to expand the more subsidized seats. So if economic circumstances changed, then it would be important for them to reach out so that, we know that regardless of what they're signed up for. So.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have?
Clarify? Sorry to follow up. So given that, I just want to be clear, since we don't know when the in-person will be, and therefore it's impossible for parents to know where they will be at this date that doesn't exist yet, will there be an opportunity once we do have some clarity for families to reassess where they are vis-a-vis community schools.
I think Director Parabella's intent is to always try to work with families. So certainly coming up with, when we're at that moment that we know we're going to begin the hybrid, at least beginning the first phase of the hybrid, that would be the time to do some surveying among the parents within community schools for the paid portion to find out what the status is. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing to point out is obviously this is a temporary solution from a weather standpoint, right? So we will need to reevaluate what this programming looks like in a few months, and I think with that we can open enrollment again. We can try to expand. I mean, it will be very different if we have access back to our buildings. Once the city report comes back. So I think we don't want to, we know there will be changes, and I think with that we want to be flexible. And I think the point to make here is that parents shouldn't feel like if they don't get in the door now, they can't get in the door down the line. I think that is a important point that you're helping guide me to. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay.
So, Chair Norman, if there's any questions for either Mr. Gorski, Ms. Bataldo, Mr. Gorski, I don't know if you want to just give a 1 minute on finance update.
Sure. And I think this kind of goes back to our finance school committee meeting that we had on September 1st, and going back to when the reopening plan was presented, we've got 3 main funding sources, grant funding sources related to COVID and reopening. One of them is the reopening grant, which was about 1.1 million from the state. The other is the technology grant for about 165,000. And then the ESSER portion of the CARES Act, which is just under $1 million. So that's a little bit over $2 million we have in special revenue related to COVID and reopening. As I explained to the Finance Committee 2 weeks ago, we've spent a fair amount of that, as you might imagine, between expenditures on PPE, Chromebooks, new furniture that we're purchasing, and various other items. So been working closely with the city. We know that we're going to have additional staffing needs, especially once we come back into a hybrid situation, potentially. Obviously, special ed needs, social, emotional, and we're also looking at purchasing additional Chromebooks. So, the city has pledged to help us with that. The city has their own allocation of CARES Act funding, and both the mayor, the city council, and the city's finance director have pledged to support the schools in whatever manner that we need financially.
Great. Are there any questions for Finance Director Gorski tonight? Can you give us the date of the next Finance and Facilities meeting? Has that been scheduled?
I don't think that that's been scheduled yet.
Okay.
Great. And Ms. Bataldo, just a quick update on enrollment. I know you guys have been very busy.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Very busy with registrations and getting registrations ready from families we started last week. We've had again last week and this week several families calling that they are moving out of town, or the kids are gonna be in homeschool, or they're gonna be going to private. We've had a survey that the state requested on students leaving between grades K through 12, and we had about 300 kids, I think, 299 kids. That was the difference between projections that we had and what actual enrollment is. they do not requested pre-K. So, and we have an additional about 75 pre-Ks that registered and are not attending. So we very low in ELL enrollment because we don't have many. We have no newcomers coming. What we see of the ELL population is students that is the mobility around the state. It's always high mobility with this population, and that's the the ELL population that we are seeing, but no newcomers.
Great. So thank you, Ms. Pataldo. This is, as you know, we have a unstable enrollment right now, as do most of the districts around us. So it's, the PIC and the Enrollment Center and Ms. Pataldo have done an excellent job trying to address the needs of both the families that are leaving and the families that are coming. So we'll continue to update school committee and let you know on the numbers as those change. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us and for this update and for being there for our families. Thanks, Regina.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask several people to put their cams on now. Assistant Superintendent Mazza, Director Trevisoni, Director Boston Davis, Director Woods, Director Q, Director Doncaster, Director Davila.
Okay, I'm gonna just bear in mind that if we start getting fuzzy, we're gonna, although we seem to be doing well. Welcome, everybody.
Great. So wanted to give an update. This team has been working exceptionally hard on the academic readiness for the system to begin remote on Friday and to continue to prepare not only for through the remote, but also into the hybrid. So I'm going to actually, I'm going to begin with Mr. Mazza and have Assistant Superintendent Mazza just sort of start off, and then we'll ask each of our directors to just make some comments, excuse me, about the highlights in their area. And I know with Director Trevisoni, you're going to take out of order the CPAC as well. Okay, so Assistant Superintendent Mazza.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, through you, Chair Norman. First, I want to say, welcome and congratulations to our three new members of our family. I think it's very exciting. And, I look forward to working with all three of you very closely. So I want to give you a bit of an update on where we are with the academics. As you know, synchronous and asynchronous instruction for students that will occur between 8:30 and 2:35. But I want to point out that there are some circumstances that involve an earlier start. And those circumstances would be around services for our language learners and our special education students, because we know we need to make sure that we provide needed and deserved services to our students. Educators, including specialists, they're expected to provide between 3 and 4 hours of daily synchronous instruction. But we also want to clarify that not all students will receive the same amount of synchronous instruction. I think it's very important to point that out. The synchronous instruction will vary by grade levels, will also be based on student needs. For example, pre-K to 2 students should expect between 1 to 2 hours of daily synchronous live online instruction. And the synchronous instruction will increase to about 4 hours at the high school level. So I know there's been some confusion out there when schedules went out in regards to parents, being overwhelmed and anxious, thinking that students would be at a computer for 6 hours straight every single day. That is not the case. Teachers have done a fantastic job of really breaking things down into smaller chunks, smaller learning blocks. So you learn a skill and then you go apply it. So there's on-screen time and off-screen time to really work on those skills. The students that also require ESL services will receive daily services as required by DESE. Students requiring special ed services will receive as required by their IEP minutes. And we're also building in small transition times and breaks into student schedules, because we want to make sure that students have a little bit of downtime in between their synchronous blocks of learning. Attendance. So DESE requires us to take attendance. And we have to differentiate between schools either in person or remotely into our student information system, which is a very important change. For us, we're going to take attendance on a daily basis, pre-K to 12, because we know the importance. We want students, we want families to understand that what we are doing, it does count. Students are expected to be involved and present in activities throughout the school day. Once again, if a student is sick, we're asking parents and caregivers to call the sick line to report an absence. That's what we basically do when we are in person. So we want to make sure that we continue with those protocols. Attendance for the LMS, the fully remote learning management system. Again, this option is intended for only families who prefer to have their students work entirely independently and on their own schedule, and who have their own academic support systems in place, such as a tutor. Students who prefer to continue learning remotely after we begin to transition to in-person instruction, and who want to continue working with SPS educators following our school schedule, will also have the opportunity to do so with us as part of the phased hybrid learning model. I think there was also a little bit of confusion about the remote piece, that the LMS was the only remote choice. That is not true. That's more of an independent choice that came out of the survey where parents had asked for this kind of a choice, but families have the option to stay fully remote with us, supported by our educators, even when we do return to our phased hybrid. Students in the LMS, they also have the option of taking specialists. I know all of the students, and we have 17 LMS students right now, 15 confirmed, have received their actual schedules from SPS, which lays out when their specialists are, because it's important that we keep that community building, we keep those students involved with their cohorts, with their friends, even though they might be doing something independently. The LMS system, we are going to check it bi-weekly. I am going to check in with families bi-weekly around attendance and around grading and around problem solving and troubleshooting to make sure that they're getting the support that they need from us. So that'll be my responsibility on a bi-weekly basis, and I'll create a tracking system for that. Again, the LMS system, they're reviewed by DESE to ensure that the curriculum is aligned to the Massachusetts grade level standards. And once again, the LMS option for K to 8 is the Florida Virtual School, and the LMS for grades 9 to 12 is Edgenuity. And again, students who enroll in the full-time LMS for elementary, the Florida Virtual Learning, they're required to attend class time, which is live teacher instruction 3 days a week, Tuesday through Thursday. Class time, again, it's live, they're interactive, and allows students and teachers to work together in an online environment. Teachers do provide personalized instruction, but again, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And a lot of what we're asking falls on parents or a tutor if one was hired, or a support system that's within the family. Grading and assessments. Again, DESE has come out with guidance that district must assess all students based on the district and educators' performance criteria during this academic year. So for us, what it means is we're going to take a look at our real-time data. We're going to take a look at our assessment data, the instruction that happens in class. We're going to make decisions about student needs to improve instruction across grades and departments. Our formative assessments in ELA and math, they provide teachers with real-time data on how students are progressing toward their grade level standards. We're also going to continue to administer GIBLS assessment 3 times a year in grades K to 3, which provides teachers with data on early literacy skills such as letter recognition, sound awareness, and fluency. So students at all grade levels will receive frequent constructive feedback from educators on synchronous and asynchronous work. This is very important. We know how crucial it is for students to have feedback and contact with their teachers about what they're doing well and what skills they need to improve on in order to master those skills in the future. In addition, students will receive traditional grades as described below beginning in September. So for us, grades K to 5, we're going to resume the use of our elementary standard-based report card for the 2021 school year.
The standards-based report card allows students to be more aware of what is expected of them. It also gives teachers a better understanding of what each student should know and be able to do at each grade level, and how to guide their instruction to match each student's needs. The K-5 report card is issued 4 times a year, as you know. Instead of letter grades, it uses 4 categories, which are listed below, and I'll describe to you just to show a student's progress towards meeting each standard. So you have an E is for exceeding the grade level standard consistently, which is not for kindergarten. There's no exceeding in kindergarten. M is for meeting the grade level standard and producing quality work. P is progressing toward the standard and producing required grade level work with teacher assistance. N is not meeting the standard and not yet able to produce required grade level work. But with that, there's always constructive feedback on how a student can produce the required grade level work. And then there's the NA, the standard if it's not addressed at that time. And you'll expect to see some NAs used in the first 2 quarters. It's because the entire curriculum can't be taught at once, which we know. And while some learning standards will be addressed throughout the entire year, others will be phased in as the school year progresses. Grades 6 to 12. They'll receive traditional grades A, B, C, D, and E, letter grades, with an NA option that teachers can use if a student has a known barrier that prevents them from completing assignments and attending synchronous classes. We think this is very important. We know families have some difficult situations and circumstances, and we want to make sure that we're flexible. We're not penalizing students who may have to work or who may have to provide childcare for a sibling. We're not penalizing them throughout the course of the year. For the Florida Virtual School, the learning management system, they have access to a personal grade book where every graded assessment is recorded. All graded assignments, current overall grade average, and teacher feedback are always available for viewing. I will have access to those as well. Final grades will be available at the end of the semester, similar to how we do it. And transcripts will be completed and sent to students. So again, I will have access to those. I will be able to see how they transfer into our grades to make for a more seamless process. The last thing I want to talk to you about for a minute is the technology platforms. We wanted to make sure to simplify the number of technology platforms for students and families. One of the things we heard, it was difficult for families, difficult for students, especially if there were multiple students in one school or multiple students in different schools with the different platforms that were being used. Sometimes families had to learn how to manage and manipulate 3 or 4 platforms, which is just, not manageable. So all schools will be using Google Classroom with Zoom or Google Meets for video conferencing. Pre-K to 2 students at Capuano, East Somerville, Winter Hill, and West will use Class Dojo, which they have all used in the past. Very user-friendly, very good for outreach for parents. And Pre-K to 2 students at Argenziano, Brown, Healy, and Kennedy will use Seesaw. One of the things I will say, a lot of our teachers have used Schoology in the past, and we're looking to have a slow migration from Schoology to Google Classroom, so we are all using the same platforms. We do have the Schoology license for 1 more year, so it will make it easier for the transfer of materials that teachers have. But again, we're looking to simplify things for families and students because we want to make sure that all students have access and they do not have to manipulate 2 or more platforms, because they have enough to do, families have enough to do to try to manage that. And with that, that wraps up the updates I have for you. I will take any questions. I will say, the work that is being done around scheduling, the work that is being done with planning, the work that is being done with family outreach has been incredible. It will continue to be incredible, and it's just, it makes me proud. We still have work to do, but we are in a much different place now than we were last spring, by far.
That's great. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Mazza. Chair Norman, I'm going to actually ask everybody to do their minute to 2 update, and then we'll take questions in full for the academic team, if that's okay for you.
That sounds like a lovely way to go. Thank you.
Wonderful. So as you know, our educators have been hard at work in professional development now, and they will be ending that on the 17th of September before the first day of class. Director Woods has been instrumental working with the academic team and others to plan what's been a wonderful menu of professional development for our staff. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to just, talk to the audience and to school committee as to what have been the highlights. So Director Woods.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I first just want to start by saying teachers are working so hard right now. Educators are working so hard. This is a very, very difficult time, and everyone's putting in, the time, the effort, the energy, and it's really incredible to see the community coming together. So, as Superintendent Skipper said, we've had several days now. I believe we're on day 10 of our PD preparation and planning period. And these days have been chock full of district-wide PD, school-based PD, and PD professional development. So district-wide professional development, school-based professional development, school-based planning time, department-based planning time, district-wide grade level meetings and planning time, independent work time, office hours. There's a variety of different ways that educators are collaborating and getting ready to welcome students back. So the district-wide PD topics were really carefully selected by everyone that's on the screen right now, this academic team. And I really want to thank each and every individual for pulling together and creating these PD opportunities for educators and educators themselves who have also led some of these opportunities. So some of our topics for district-wide PD have included guidelines for remote learning, online platforms and tools to support remote instruction, engaging with families to support student learning, considerations for special populations, including multilingual learners and special education students, keeping equity at the forefront, and understanding trauma and trauma-sensitive schools in the midst of COVID-19. And so we really wanted to cover a wide array of topics that educators may need to consider as they start planning for this very, very unique year. And I think one thing that's been really well received is that after the first week of PD and after the second week of PD, we did survey all the educators in the district and we said, how's it going? Fully expecting that some of the feedback would be, and it was, it's a lot to take in and a lot to handle. But educators are also super appreciative of the time and the effort that has gone into this planning, and they see that, and I think they're reflecting it back. And so we really truly reviewed all of that feedback that educators provided, and we made changes to the PD schedule based on their feedback. And educators noted that and were really appreciative. They said after the first week, that was great, but I need more time to plan. Like, I need to do my work. And so we said, great, here's more time to plan. And then after the end of week 2, they said, thank you for the time. So it's been really a collaborative effort between the administrative team, all the school principals, the administration, the teachers, all the different educators, the paraprofessionals. And so I'm just really grateful to be a part of that team. But that's where we are with PD, and we have 2 very exciting days left, and then PD doesn't end, but the 12 dedicated days end, and will continue throughout the year.
Thank you so much, Director Woods. So Dr. Watson Davis has been hard at work with our equity and excellence agenda. And so if you wanted to just give a quick update on the stuff we're working on.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So I'll be brief here. I'll pick up off of where Karen just left off and share a little bit about the PD that was offered for the entire district. And this was actually based off of educator feedback asking for both district-wide professional development around areas to advance equity, and then also around multi-leveled kind of tiered support when it comes to engaging with equity, and that some folks are brand new in thinking about issues of equity, inequity, race, racism, etc., anti-racism, for example, whereas others have engaged in the work for years, decades even. And so the PD that was offered last week and will conclude tomorrow, there was one course level that was offered by Facing History, and they did kind of a foundational course on the history, and will continue tomorrow on the history of equity and inequities in our schools, and what does inequity look like in our schools, and based on the history, talking about things like the eugenics movement and what does that look like today in present day. And so they'll conclude tomorrow. And there were over, I think it was pretty constant, around 330 educators, 340 educators in that session. And then the other professional development was given by Dr. Darren Graves of Simmons, and he's also with the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And he did a critical race theory and education session where he talked about schooling for critical consciousness, what that means. And so these were for folks who have engaged in thinking about equity and inequity in schools and in classrooms for a while. And that was around 300, a little bit over, actually. We had a little bit of overflow participants as well. And so we got some really outstanding feedback from those sessions, which is great to hear. And we also had sessions before, school-based sessions before, to kind of preview the session coming up, where school leaders and equity specialists, which I'll talk about in a minute, can talk through and prepare schools for the session, and then a debrief session after. So tomorrow, again, where we conclude the professional development, all schools will have some small groups, some full school debrief sessions after the professional development to kind of have whole district and then also applicable to your own school community. So speaking of the equity specialist role, this is a new role that we spoke about last spring, but we're launching. So we have hired all except for one school, which we're scheduling the interview now. So we have new equity specialists in each school. Remember, this is a leadership role that works closely with the school leadership, works closely with the principal, works closely with the instructional leadership team, school site council, to support and facilitate all things under the equity umbrella as it relates to this school community. So this person will work with our school communities, work with educators, will work with myself regularly to think about how we're meeting the needs of each school and each school community, but also moving together as a district in a systematic way and thinking strategically about how we're moving forward to advance equity and advance becoming an anti-racist district. And then finally, the last update that I'll give now around reopening is we also started some new professional development geared towards our administrators. So there are 2 cohorts starting. One started last week and one will start soon. One is with a program called Unbound Ed. So we started with about 20 administrators last week. And we are engaging every few weeks in professional development around developing yourselves to support work in the instructional core to advance equity in our schools. And then one is with the SEED project, the National SEED project. And so with SEED, that is personal kind of reflection and learning from each other in a group. And we will launch that shortly. And that is with Dr. Sarah Fairman of the Harvard Graduate School of Education.
Awesome. Terrific work. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Boston Davis. And I know that Director Doncaster has been working hard with our embedded mental health partners, as well as our school counselors to ready ourselves, have our systems set. So Director Doncaster.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My internet's a little iffy, so if I freeze, I apologize. Yes, I've been working with the counselors, the redirects, the deans of students to sort of what is the, to get us ready for the school year. We had to reconsider our 504 accommodation plans for remote learning. So they are going through their current plans. We have about 200 with the counselor, with the teacher. And if there's something that needs to be adjusted for remote learning, they are having conferences with parents and teachers to make sure that if we can make sure those accommodations happen, or it's very clear that they can't happen because of the physicality of the remote learning. This social emotional is moving along. We have our counselors and our social emotional teams making sure that second step will be used with fidelity, and we are supplementing those supplying supplemental lessons in the areas where that are more current event areas for our district and for the world, so the COVID and the other topics, so that teachers are ready to open up conversations and to process with children, with our students in the first few days of school. We've made it very clear that we would like, we really would like an emphasis on processing, building community, creating a learning community, making students feel safe and accepted in class, and having that time and space to process and to get used to the remote learning, to understand that attendance is important, and to have, and with my administrative staff and the SST teams, which are us, our SST teams are up and running. We're already talking about students that weren't engaged at the remote as of March last year. So students are already on our radar. We're talking about those students, and we are getting ready to reach out and make sure that somebody from the building is reaching out to them and their family to make sure they're ready to go. A lot of kids are really nervous and really anxious about what this is going to look like. On one hand, they want to see their friends and they want to go to school and they want something to do. But on the other hand, this is a different world now. And so there's a lot of anxiety out there. So part of my job is to teach teachers, which is part of my PD that I'm doing on Wednesday morning, is to really teach teachers to understand that creating communities and really learning the story of each one of your students and the background and where they come from will help you understand their baseline. If they start to move off their baseline and show you a little bit of red flags, then you can, as a teacher, support them, individually as a student, as part of the classroom community, speaking with their parents, and if you need to reach out to Tier 2, to the counselor, to the redirect, to the deans of student, to refer them to the SST team. That's how the way you get there is by understanding and knowing your students. So we've been doing a lot of work just reminding people to build those relationships, to make students feel safe and healthy and accepted, and for who they are from wherever they come from, and that their story is special and that we believe in them. And so I've been working with the staff on that, and then we're having our second, actually third now it might be, Karen, trauma sensitive classroom with the COVID, the COVID sort of angle lens, and that's happening also on Wednesday, and I'm really excited, and I'm glad it's actually happening at the end of the PD, because it kind of will remind them, that for the emotional and mental health of our students is really the most important thing as we go into this new and unusual and different year. And that I love to use the words flexibility and patience, and that we need to be flexible, we need to be patient, we need to be empathetic and understand what they've gone through. And everyone's really been so receptive to all the PD and all the planning, because like people have said before, teachers it's a lot to do the planning and get ready for this, but they're actually been troopers, and I think they're all really excited to get going, and we will see what happens.
Thank you, Director Doncaster. And I think that, we anticipate that when our students come back, we know that many have experienced a lot of the ills of COVID, either firsthand or tangentially. But we're also really conscious of all of the racial injustice that's happened, and specifically, what our young people of color have experienced, seeing the murders of Daniel Prude, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and we recognize that there needs to be a safe space to process these things. So SEL is going to be extremely important. The work that we're doing on equity is going to be extremely important, and we're trying to work really cohesively as a team with our educators to make sure that our young people have that space to be able to feel safe and to bring the feelings that they have from the summer and the early fall. So thank you to all for your work on that, to Dr. Boston Davis and to Director Doncaster on that. And so now our other three, we're going to start with the little guys. So Dr. Q, I know this is one of your favorite times when all of our little ones are getting all queued up to start to re-engage. It's a little bit different this year, for sure, but nonetheless, I know there's a lot of planning that's happening from the early childhood team. Would you like to share a little bit?
Sure. I happened to be at Capuano a week or so ago when families were coming to pick up Chromebooks, and if the way that children were bounding out of their cars and running up the street towards the school is any indication of children's excitement to start preschool or kindergarten. That was it. So we are, with that in mind, continuing with our traditions of supporting children to develop stamina for new learning situations and to internalize the routines and agreements and new people that they're going to meet in, whether it's in remote learning or in-person learning. And so we've always had that kind of phase-in plan, and we will be doing the same through remote learning to gradually introduce children and their families to doing school remotely. Teachers are in the process now of starting to reach out for one-to-one conversations, and then next week, each school will have a particular day when families will be invited to come and pick up home learning supplies that teachers, paraprofessionals, and coaches are busily assembling now. And then they will have an opportunity to meet somebody from their school, whether it's their classroom teacher, a paraprofessional, principal, somebody who has a connection to that child. And if they can't come on those days, then principals will be working with their staff and communicating with families as well as liaisons to make sure that families have an opportunity pre-K and K to come to the school to meet someone and get their home learning supplies. And along with that, the teachers have been working, so as Karen said, so hard. It's really impressive to watch, to see the progress that has been made since August 31st, where we provided teachers with some scaffolding to get work and schedules done. And now they're really hunkering down with what does curriculum look like and what are the lessons that we learned from the spring that we need to take into consideration as we offer curriculum. So that's happening, and then there'll be, once the pre-K and K start on the 25th, they'll be gradually working up to longer and longer amounts of time when they can be directly engaged. We know that children need time to onboard to that, and so do families. And so teachers are building in intentional outdoor play, break time, time to go and have a sensory experience. All of that is being taken into consideration with curriculum, where the big ideas are really about working together to get ready for school. We can learn at home, and we can be a community even though we aren't together. So we're anchoring the curriculum in those big ideas with texts and math and science and SEL and approach to learning, and it's actually all coming together in quite a beautiful, beautiful way. And many thanks to Gretchen Saunders, kindergarten teacher at the Brown, who stepped up to help organize the intricacies of the orientation process, including interpreters and the scheduling and putting together of material. So much, much appreciated to her and the folks at the Enrollment Center and the principals for that. So that's where we are with early ed.
Awesome, thank you. We're excited to, I know that several of the schools have some of their youngest students coming in and gathering near the tents, socially distanced, to be able to sort of meet principals and educators and so forth. So it'll be exciting to be able to see the students that are coming. And thank you to you and your team for your tireless work in getting ready. So, Dr. Davila, 2 hats. Which one do you want to start with?
I'll start with the students. Yay, the students. We get to see them on Friday, and so excited. And our obligation to our multilingual learners doesn't change, whether we're remote or whether we're working towards other modes of learning. Our obligation is, as Chad mentioned, is daily ESL, is meaningful access to rigorous curriculum every day, opportunities to practice language, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and we can't wait to have them back, our students. Our teachers, my goodness, yes, they have been working so hard, unbelievably hard. And, you know, and I think in each one of our departments, we're putting different puzzles together. So teachers have been in the schools working under the direction of the principals, really for planning and grade level teams. But each one of our departments it puts them together, collaborating in different program configurations. So the teachers have been, putting the puzzle of scheduling together, collaborating really, really beautifully, and sustaining energy in this really, really difficult time. So that's just been amazing to see. I think particularly for language learners, multilingual learners, we're focusing on the first, besides the SEL and all those important welcoming, belonging things that we need to do, we're focusing on developing our own assessments, not scary testing or anything like that, but getting to know our students. What have they learned over these last 6 months? Where do they need the most supports? What can they express orally to us? What can they express in writing? And then we'll work together as a big team of teachers and educators to really see where our students are with language, so we know what our next teaching moves are. So we're working together with that. And then we got the families, right? So with families, our LPAC, our English Learner Parent Advisory Council, has been really, really solid throughout the spring and the summer. They're ready to go. We're planning our first large LPAC meeting in a couple of weeks. We're piloting. We're moving ahead with our pilot of virtual online English classes with the Welcome Project in collaboration with them, because we know those English classes are not only about learning the language, but also an amazing opportunity for engagement, sharing information. I was listening to Dr. Curley talk about the A cohorts, the B cohorts, the schedule, the this, the that, the that. And I'm looking at us as English speakers, and we're listening to somebody talk to us in English, and just reminding myself how difficult all this changing information is when you are new to the language. So we have to be extra patient. We have to use all of our methods of communication. We're collaborating very, very much with the Yale department, with multilingual services, with the whole SFLC, with communications, to help families across the board, whether you're an English speaker or whether you're new to the language, to understand how we share in this, we share in the education of our children. I'm excited. I want to go back to school, and I'm really excited about Friday. I think it's going to be a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, very much. And I saved Sparkle for last. So, Dr. Trevisoni.
I love that I got a degree through that whole thing with the Sparkle. I have a degree in Sparkle. I'm a doctor in Sparkle. I want to start, and Mary, I know you had said it, but I just want to thank this outstanding leadership team, and it's such a pleasure and an honor to be part of it, doing this really difficult work. So I just want to acknowledge that. And Mary did talk about Sparkle. I'm so proud of the special educators that I've enjoyed working with. I'm sure you know we have about 300 special educators. That's from OTs all the way up, and they've been outstanding. And we really, we deal with a lot of difficult things and a lot of challenges. We want to go back to school, a lot of struggles. And so our theme this year is that we're going to lead through joy. We're never going to lose sight of the joy, why we do what we do every single day, and try to find the joy in what we do, even during difficult times. And so the best way to find joy is you sparkle. You shine. No matter how bad things are, you shine. And so we try to recognize and acknowledge the things that we're trying to do to shine, to help our students and our families shine throughout this time. So I just want to acknowledge that. And echo what everyone has said. Special ed, we always have a little extra lens on things on top of everything else. And I don't want to keep you all that long. Some things that we've really been doing is we're been reaching out to families already. We are required to develop what's called a COVID-19 special education learning plan. And that's new, slightly different from the remote learning plans we had created in the spring. And staff have been outstanding. I've been meeting with staff every week in talking to them and helping them learn how to develop these plans according to DESE guidance. And they've already been reaching out to families to say, we will be providing all of the minutes on the IEP, adhering to the free and appropriate public education through both synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And how does that work? Listening to families, asking families, you know, what has been their experience? What has been their experience for the child? How can we get started? What are the things that we can do? So it's a moving document, and we've gotten a lot of great traction. So it's been great. Part of that, I've been meeting with about 30 special educators over the summer to really brainstorm and figure out how best to meet the needs of our students. And so we did a lot of work and found some research-based multisensory asynchronous programs for students to use when they're not in synchronous instruction. So some of that's Lexia reading, unique learning systems, boom cards, IXL math, and Dreambox math. So you'll be learning about them, and it's dependent upon the child and their ability and their needs at that time. But they are all research-based and will collect the data, so they're going to be a great tool for us in order to continue to meet the needs of our students. Something that, we've started, so excited, we've started doing our eligibility testing. Psychologists started the eligibility testing for psychologicals and academics. We're on a third week outside. We've had a few bumps in the road, but we've gotten through it with joy. We've led through joy through difficult situations, and staff were there testing today. So it's been going really well. And I think the kids are enjoying being outside in a safe, protected place to get that done. So it's nice to be able to have that system back in place. And one thing we don't talk a lot about, we've talked about in the past that got delayed in the spring, was we've already started planning and working with Cambridge College on our early childhood program. Something we've been trying to do for a year. And we have someone in place to really has already started that process, has already started to reach out to families and students, develop our cohort for spring. So even in the midst of everything, when we're trying to solve problems and figure out how we're going to get started, we're planning and trying to make sure we develop and enhance the expectations for kids. So we're excited, we're ready to go. And I think once we can start to see kids, everybody's anxiety level will start to come down, including our own. It's nice to have teachers back, but they bring my anxiety back up. So I think that once we get to see kids, we'll be in a much better shape. So thank you.
So, Chair Norman, I just want to say such an incredible amount of hard work that all of these directors have been doing, all of the operations folks have been doing to support the academics. Really, the all leadership team are building principals and vice principals, just an incredible amount of work. And as you heard from all of us, the teachers have just really been working hard to absorb so much in a short period of time to bring their very best to this remote learning. So we're looking forward to the next few days, but particularly to Friday, when we get reminded of exactly why we do what we do, which is for the students and the families. So with that, Chair Norman, that is our academic presentation, and we're happy to take any questions.
There are some questions, but before that, on behalf of the entire school committee, a deep, deep, deep thank you and gratitude, because this wasn't just planning for this year. This has been since March 11th or 12th, whatever day we went out. It was working through the summer. It was planning. It was planning while you're also teaching students, and this has been at every level. And I thank this leadership team for this presentation and another long day, but also every member of our community who has shown up to pack backpacks or hand out food or deliver a Chromebook, or it has been, I know I've said it before, and I don't mean it in any trite way, but the overall effort is incredible, and those moments of detail and humanity and kindness and patience and flexibility. Was that you, Liz? I have to remind myself that also as a parent, right? Because this isn't easy for any of us, but I know that a lot of us are really, really like counting down till Friday. Let's get the kids there. So there are some questions, starting with Alana Krepchin. And Alana, how are you?
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Two quick questions, I think, for Mr. Mazza. One is, if parents still want to sign up for the LMS, can they do that? And the second question is homework in the age of remote learning. Is that just considered what the asynchronous work is that they're doing during the day, or will there be an expectation that there's extra work outside of that 8:35 to 2:35? Does it range by age? Is there sort of some thinking around that? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair Norman. So to answer your first question, yes. The homework piece, I think it's dependent. I mean, I think, we can be creative with the asynchronous work and look at it as a creative way to have students work on skills that they normally would do after school. But I also think that as students get older, I think it's important that they do get used to the process of homework, especially in a remote setting. I mean, I don't think we can just forget that homework exists based on the fact that we're in remote right now. But I think teachers can be creative in how they assign homework. But again, we're not looking to inundate, younger kids or any students with a ton of homework, but making things that are meaningful and useful for them and that will move them forward in building their skill sets, as they move throughout the school year. So, I look forward to having conversations with educators. But again, I think educators know what's best for their kids, and they know what their students need and what they do not need. And I think it'll be an important part of the process.
And Mr. Mazza, just to be clear, when you said yes to the first part of Ms. Krepchin's question, can you just expand on that just briefly?
The first part of your question for me, because these days I ask parents when I talk to them all the time, is what I'm saying, does it make any sense to you? Because when I say it, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So yes.
So my first question was just, the first question was just if parents still want to do the LMS option, can they still sign up for that?
Of course, yes, they can absolutely sign up for it. I mean, we're having an orientation tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And if any parent is interested in just sitting in to see if this is a right fit for them, they can certainly do that. But I think it's important to be flexible in these times, for sure.
Thank you for that. Mr. Green?
Sorry. So a couple quick things. Well, one not thing, which is, so this is my 5th year in the school committee, and I'm still finding myself learning, right? I'm a past chair, which gives you a whole different view of the district. But this is the first summer as part of my work on the negotiation committee where I really had to see in the weeds how much work goes into running a school. However hard you think it might be from the outside, it is 10 times harder. And to watch this team navigate those things with style, aplomb, and infinite patience has been, I wouldn't say a joy to watch because it's been a rough summer, but it has given me newfound faith in Somerville Public Schools. That being said, hearing all of these updates as to, it was really good tonight to be able to talk about education again, right? I think it's hard to remember that all of the talk about schedules, about cohort, about all of these things are really just trying to create the scaffolding under which actual learning happens, right? And remote learning, which even when we're back in a hybrid, which the sooner the better, I think we all agree, it's still gonna have a very huge remote component. Remote learning is a completely different skill set than in-person learning. And so it's gonna take us time, it's gonna take us energy. It already has, it takes a lot of bandwidth, which is not something Somerville Public Schools had a surplus of. So I say this as almost myself as a parent, that this is really hard and we're going to get it wrong sometimes, but the amount of energy, effort, and work being put to get it right is literally gobsmacking. Now my quick questions. Through you to Dr. Davis, and I think probably to others as well, one of the things that has shown up in the schedule is the Wednesday afternoon asynchronous reading time. I am a big fan of it because I think it allows us a space to try some really innovative things as far as literacy education in the district. But my understanding, and I'm kind of cheating because I know the answer to this, but I think it hasn't said, is that it also allows us to experiment and try some new things as far as redirecting our curriculum towards cultural competency. And I know that's something ILT is looking at. So could you speak a little bit about that piece and a little about the equity work that's been going on into the thinking about this remote year?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the question. So in short, there will be an opportunity for the district to support independent reading in the texts that students are selecting during that independent reading time, which will be on Wednesday afternoon. We did focus for pretty much our entire district level ILT meeting last week on, we did a lot of things. We took a look at books. We thought about, what is our ultimate goal? We thought about how we can include educator perspective and thoughts for those that want to contribute, and that I've had a lot of educators just kind of send me emails and saying, hey, this would be a really great book for middle schoolers if we're able to. And so the goals there are around just kind of diversity of perspective. When we think about the protagonists in the books, for example, how can we diversify who is the center of a story? Who is the storyteller, who are the authors that write the books, in what languages are the characters speaking, what is the experience of the characters. And so we're thinking from that, so it's at the very beginning stages, but that's the beginning of the work there.
Chair Norman, if I could just jump in for 1 second, Dr. Boston Davis and Karen, and Lisa with the ILT have done a fantastic job. But one of the pieces that I think we all, have thought about and will continue to think about are our young learners during that independent reading asynchronous time, because it looks far different for them than it does for students who know how to read and can sit with a book. So one of the things we're thinking about are, read alouds. What can we do to engage students and have them learn to love reading while they're sitting at a computer? I've talked to several parents and they've asked me, they're concerned about just sticking their child with a book, knowing that they can't read, and then it becomes unproductive. So I think as a district, you're going to see the idea of read alouds tailored to student need will benefit our young learners far more than just giving them a book. And then when they do learn how to read and they find that love for reading, then that book comes in handy. But I think we haven't lost sight of that. That's a big focus of that Wednesday piece, because they often do get forgotten. As we forget about the young ones who haven't built those reading skills yet, but we are on top of that, and we are going to create a plan for our young ones, for sure.
As the father of a first grader, that was my follow-up question, so thank you for preempting me. And I just have one more question, actually through you to Superintendent Mazza. And it's kind of a follow-up, and I'm technically violating our public comment rules, but since it's on the agenda, I'm going to go ahead and do it. You mentioned that DESE requires daily attendance, and that is right, and that is also right for children. But came up in public comment, it was a question I had as well, especially for those of us who are parents of young children. If we're not on them every day, they're probably going to miss some online sessions. How will our attendance policy account for that?
Yeah, through you, Chair Norman, I think that's a great question. I mean, as a father of a 4-year-old, I'm kind of cringing myself as I look at, the attendance policy. But I think, there needs to be flexibility. I think, the conversations that we have with families, the conversations that we have with students, with young adults around, what can we do to keep kids engaged as much as we can and give them something useful to learn? It's not about time on the computer, it's about what they're actually learning. And I think that is an important piece. So, for, the person who spoke during open comment, public comment, and to your question, I think we have to keep those lines of communication open, to have conversations with teachers, with administrators, with counselors about, my child's doing this amount of work. And I don't think that we're going to be that stringent where we're going to turn parents off. I think this is, unprecedented. And I think we have to work with our families to make sure that they're comfortable and they're getting something productive out of what we are providing for them. Did that answer your question?
I think as much as we can at this point. I think my takeaway is that we're going to be flexible and we don't know yet, and that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think with attendance, I think if we go back to sort of what is the goal of attendance, the goal of attendance is to measure engagement. It's to measure students being there and participating and being part of the class. And there's going to be sometimes where there's situations arise in this environment where that's not as possible or not as possible every single period. I think as long as there's good communication with the families, our requirement is to take attendance once a day. So at the beginning, we have a system of taking attendance period based at high school levels. And that is also, as we get into sort of middle school, a smart way to do it, because it really speaks to all the individual subjects. I think when it comes to the pre-K to 5, again, a lot's going to be about communication with the teacher around making sure that students make as much of the synchronous as possible. And then with the asynchronous, there'd be more flexibility there. So again, this is uncharted territory, so we're going into it with good faith and to make sure that there is some flexibility there for families. And the best thing the families can do is to make sure they're in good communication with their educator, with their teacher.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Dr. Ackman and then Laura, and then Ms. Batone for the questions. Dr. Ackman?
Thank you. So my question is almost like a parallel to Mr. Green's, is, the flips, like, I appreciate that the point of attendance is to measure engagement, but the flip side of attendance is that we are held accountable and it is attached to very real dollars for us. And I'm curious, and, I don't know if there's even staff here to answer this, like, our pre-K students, can we have more flexibility with them because they're not mandatory, for lack of a better way of putting it? So we pay for them. Does that question make sense? Like, I'm just trying to understand sort of where stricter accountability begins is my larger question. From that frame of reference of attendance and accountability and money, because this is going to matter for the next academic year.
Correct. So as you know, once a student turns 6, which is generally, going into the 1st grade, that's when education becomes compulsory. Prior to that, in terms of the attendance, we report the attendance. So, for us, 10 days absent is what triggers a discharge, or what triggers the student being taken off the rolls. If a student's in 5 days and then out 2 and then in 3, in those grades pre-K and K, the student continues to stay onto the rolls. That said, we strive to have our pre-Ks and Ks in and as active as possible with us, whether it's physically or remotely. So that will be the goal, and that'll continue to be the goal. But yeah, in answer to your question, they would continue to stay on the rolls unless they're absent 10 days in a row, where we can't reach the parent, we have no idea what's going on, there's no underlying medical issue, and in which case then we would discharge.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Patone?
Thank you, Chair Norman, through you to whomever, is probably Mr. Mazza. I've had a couple questions about any plans to engage parents and help them and train them to better support their students with remote learning. It might not be something you're ready to talk about, because I know we're flooding families with a lot of information. So if you want to defer this to the future, I just want to make sure that this is still in the mix and maybe what it's going to be looking like. Thank you.
So
And
through
thank you, everyone.
Jump in here too.
Assistant Sue, Maz, I'll take it.
Okay.
So Ms. Norman, Madam Chair, to Ms. Davila, Dr. Davila, to speak a little bit about some of the planning for the family training.
Yeah, we've actually been working on this through the summer in collaboration with the tech department and Jason Barron's innovation specialist and Somerville Media Center. So we've been producing collaboratively a number of instructional videos that can be seen on YouTube, can be accessed in family meetings and all kinds of venues. So we know really that in remote learning, children's success is dependent on family knowledge about the tools. So it's a primary concern, and we've got lots of avenues that we're working on. One-to-one kind of trainings, recorded trainings, and just continued information in every form, so that families are familiar with the platforms, they're familiar with using the tools that their children are. And there's one thing as I'm, it's a really good question. I think that when we're talking about attendance and engagement and participation, we really need to look at some of our assumptions about what families are capable of doing, depending on the platform that we do use. So phone-based applications, we know, you can sign into Zoom with your phone, and families are very skilled at doing that and can access information from us when we know which tools to use, and we don't make assumptions about what kids can and cannot do and what families can and cannot do, because I know I agree that for younger ones, there's some developmental realities for little kids using this mode, but my estimation really is 3rd grade and above, maybe 2nd grade and above, kids can really do this. And also, I've learned, been very pleasantly surprised how skilled parents are. Once they've been shown how to do it, they can do it.
Thank you. Ms. Krepshin, you had a question?
I do, thank you. I'm not sure who the question is for, but through the chair to whoever wants to take it. I know early on in this, we talked a lot about teacher collaborations across grade spans, across different schools. And now that we've had a bunch of this PD and now that schedules have gone out, I've heard from some parents wondering sort of where that went. So I don't know who wants to speak to that, but.
Well, I think we all can speak to that in different ways. And
I'm
Sarah,
sure.
Christine, you jump in.
I can just jump in on the technology part of it. I mean, it's sort of the physical reality of collaborating with colleagues in other school buildings when you have to drive and park, as opposed to signing into a Zoom meeting, has really helped us blossom collaboration, just picking up on the tech piece.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen that happen firsthand in the pre-K and K teams, where teacher leaders have emerged in really strong, really powerful ways to lead teams because of the ease of being able to do so, and out of necessity, because we can't all do everything and we're all on a learning curve. And so this teacher collaboration that's happened through professional development has then expanded and extended itself into some teacher leadership opportunities that I think Karen is working on closely to formalize expanding on the work that she did last year on ed leadership. So really exciting times, actually.
Yeah, I would echo that, Lisa. I think that, we get to work with people not within their school building, but, throughout. And it allows people to shine. It allows people, you don't really know that person that well. You're learning something. You can step out and ask a question and not feel like people are going to say, oh, it's Christine again, or oh, it's something. You just get that opportunity to do it. And it's been a great opportunity for that. I'd love to see it expand a little bit more. I'll be honest, within the department, I think it's been great. I think within the building, the principals have really led some of that work within the buildings. But really, how do we, during this time, truly collaborate general education, special education, English language learners to wrap around students? That it's all.
Chairman, if I could, I think, from a 10,000 foot level, the ultimate goal is to create consistency across the district. Every grade level, every discipline, taking teacher skill sets, bringing them together to create, rigorous, hands-on, project-based learning experiences for kids, that include collaboration with special educators, language learners, ESL specialists, and gen ed, general educators. That's the collaboration that we're talking about. So when we began this over the summer, it was with the belief in the goal that we were going to continue to sustain this. And I think that has happened. And I think the district teachers will become stronger teachers. They'll get better at collaborating, lesson delivery, and ultimately, students will get what they need on a daily basis from our educators. So, the answer to your question is it will continue. I guess I could have just said that.
Thank you.
I'd like to also, if you don't mind, I'd like to give a shout out to all the support systems too, because I've never seen so much collaboration between all the counselors across up to K to 8. I mean, K to 12. We used to have this K to 8 and then this high school sort of separation. That's really not happening anymore in the pre-K to 12 support systems with the counselors. And then the redirects have really started collaborating because they all work through the summer. The redirects and the deans of students are really collaborating with each other and meeting in groups even without my direction to collaborate and look to the future and what's the best practice for, based around attendance and discipline and engagement. So I've been really proud of them for sort of really finding each other and really becoming this larger think tank than they were before. And if I came in and I didn't do the right thing through the chair, I apologize.
No, we're good.
Yeah, I would say that for true collaboration to happen, you have to have time and structures. And so I think the technology is really helping us to identify the structures. I think the time is something that we are carving out in the remote setting. I think it's something we have to continue to struggle to carve out in a physical. Yeah.
So this will be last call for my colleagues because this outstanding team has probably, I don't know, is it a 13 or 14 hour day for you all? So I want to thank you all, not just for being with us tonight, but yes, but putting your whole heart and head and heart into all of this, and also the way that you all work together. I mean, I think people lead by example, and as district leaders, how you work with each other informs how other people learn to work with each other as well. So thank you all, and I wish you a good night and a restful night because it's getting late. And also enjoy Friday when the students come back. That'll be good fun. Thank you so much. Superintendent Skipper, was there any more to your report, or are we moving on to the report of the subcommittees?
We're moving on, Chair Norman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Go home.
Next, the report of subcommittees, school committee meeting of finance and facilities from September 2nd. Mr. Green?
Yes, thank you. Just so many tabs and so many windows. The Finance and Facilities Subcommittee met on September 2nd. Present were A. Green, I. Krepshin, and E. Barish. Also in attendance were C. Norman, Superintendent Skipper, Superintendent Mazza, and Finance Director Gorski. After some technical difficulties, we came to order at 6:08 p.m. We had 2 items on the agenda. First was an update from Director Gorski on changes to spending due to COVID. To date, Somerville Public Schools has encumbered $1,516,269.76 in COVID-related expenses, most related to, and I'm sure if I'm repeating from Director Gorski's update to the whole committee, most related to infrastructure for remote learning, which means technology and internet for economically distressed families, and the purchase of PPE and furniture for eventual in-person learning. As school hasn't started yet, this number will go up. So far, we have been able to absorb these costs in CARES Act and other COVID grants. As Director noted, we've gotten roughly $2 million in those grants. That money is almost out, 3/4 spent already. This brought us to a discussion of known expenses coming. We'll be working with the city on the cost of HVAC improvements to the buildings, as the buildings are technically DPW responsibility. We'll also be working with the city on the cost of the nutrition program. In normal years, between reimbursements and lunch costs, the nutrition program in Somerville is self-funding and has been so well managed to be able to absorb the costs of making the East Somerville, the Healy, the Winter Hill, Next Wave Full Circle, and Somerville High universal free lunch. However, with the shift to remote, revenue has not been coming in, while the program continues to shoulder the costs of providing meals to people in need and keeping our staff whole in preparation for in-person learning. Thanks to good fiscal management and the prepayment of some FY21 expenses, we've been able to absorb the costs so far, but an extended remote learning period will require either help from the city or undesirable costs to nutrition services and/or staffing. Finally, we examined the June and July/August bill rolls after some questions about, again, paying some FY21, which began July 1st, costs with remaining FY20. Ms. Krepshin moved and Ms. Barish seconded to approve the bill rolls, which passed unanimously. Then, after a motion to adjourn by Ms. Krepshin, was seconded by Ms. Barish and passed unanimously, we adjourned at 6:54 p.m. First, I move to accept the recommendation of the Finance Committee to approve the June and July, August bill rolls.
Second.
Who was that?
Sorry, Sarah Phillips.
Thank you so much. So there's a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any discussion? Can I get a roll call vote on that, please?
Sure. Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Norman,
Yes.
Dr. Ackman,
Yes.
Ms. Krepshin,
Yes.
Ms. Barish,
Yes.
Dr. Phillips,
Yes.
President McLaughlin,
Yes.
Ms. Patone,
Yes.
and Mayor Curtatone. Motion carries.
I now move to accept the Finance and Facilities report for September 2nd, 2020.
Seconded by Laura Patone.
There is a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Ms. Patone. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Did want to just add one little editorial comment because I think it's important for people who may not follow our budget as close as we do. That $1.5 million, politically speaking, doesn't sound like a lot, but to put it in context, that's already 2% of what we spend in a normal year. That is costs that if we didn't get federal assistance, we wouldn't be able to absorb. And again, school hasn't started yet. And to put that also in context, we are currently looking at the possibility of losing $1.2 million in funding next year. I say all this to say that right now, Somerville Public Schools finances are fine, but that is distinctly a right now thing. And the future, even with the immense support we've gotten from the city, does not look to be great. And we're going to probably make some hard priority decisions in the months to come.
Thank you for that context. Is there any other discussion or comments? Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Norman,
Yes.
Dr. Ackman,
Yes.
Gretchen,
Yes.
Barish,
Yes.
Dr. Phillips,
Yes.
President McLaughlin,
Yes.
Dr. Tone,
Yes.
Mayor Curtatone. Motion carries.
Thank you. You know what? I just realized that I was going to take the report out of order, out of new business report of the CPAC Town Hall while Miss Director Trebisoni was still here. I don't know if she is still here with us. Why don't we do that before going to the unfinished business so that Miss Trebisoni, I apologize. So at our last meeting, Ms. Patone wanted to report out on the CPAC Town Hall and thought it would be useful to have Director Trebisoni there, who has also participated in that meeting. So, Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair Norman. So the CPAC hosted a town hall. CPAC is the Somerville Special Education Advisory Council. I want to thanks to the CPAC officers, Michelle Lippens, Leonora Hellestrong, and Lucy De Toledo, as well as the Director of Special Education, Christine Trebisoni, and the Assistant Superintendent, Chaz Maza, as well as Chair Norman for participating in this event. They had over 100 parents and guardians who participated, and I want to thank them for their involvement, as well as several who took advantage of interpretation. This is the first time the CPAC hosted an event remotely with simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Portuguese. It was challenging, but thanks to the interpreters arranged by the SFLC, as well as the CPAC leadership and Director Trebisoni for increasing the accessibility of these types of events. It was a real milestone for this organization. I want to acknowledge the extreme challenge of working at home and supporting students with special needs. And a lot of the messaging from some of the parents and guardians was how impossible it felt, particularly in the spring. There were lots of questions and comments, and I'm going to try to summarize them. I'm not going to necessarily attempt to answer them. Some of them were answered, so I'll make some reference to that. And Christine, when I'm done, you're welcome to comment on any of these things. And some of them we've already discussed here. So there were lots of questions regarding evaluations that had to be postponed back in the spring due to the pandemic. And the district already set up earlier, I think in August, scheduling in summer evaluations where they were doing outside intents. So they know there's a backlog and there's a lot of energy being put to doing that work. There was strong advocacy for in-person, outdoor or otherwise, including in-home service delivery, and not wanting students to have to wait for the hybrid implementation. The message was clear: students with special needs need in-person education as soon as possible. And many of the families felt like the remote options, while could be helpful, particularly if a parent was at home supporting the student directly, almost as their own additional teacher. When families are working, it's really difficult to implement that or take advantage of that. There was a request to consider remote daily check-ins for students with attention, executive function, emotional, and behavioral challenges via paras or other educators or staff, especially those in 5th grade and older, where expectations to work are higher, and because right now in our phased hybrid, they are prioritized last for in-person. So these are students that are not necessarily the most medically challenged, which are listed in as our first priority for return to in-person through the hybrid. These are students that have other needs that would be prioritized later, and these families really feel strongly that their students could really benefit from some check-in, by live staff, whether that's on the phone or via Zoom. There were questions regarding IEPs that were created with the assumption of in-person learning for the fall, and the feedback, of course, was encouraging families to reconvene the team. But as Director Trebisoni had referenced before, all families are being contacted because the need and the expectation that there's going to be COVID-19 special education learning plans created for all students. So there's kind of a matchup there. There were questions just in general about how services will be delivered virtually and that feeling that they weren't delivered in the spring. How will districts make up missing skills and lessons from the spring? Scheduling challenges with school and complementary programming with community schools and rec, and how what were the plans to support students with special needs? And I know we've talked about this in previous meetings about how the district is going to work to support that. You know, the feeling the best possible remote learning, no matter how robust, maybe not effective for these populations of students. Concerns about social and emotional needs of our students. Will there be enough counselors to support that? And as well as interest in virtual and events to help parents, whether with educators or with other parents, to share best practices for remote learning. So these are just the highlights of what came out of the event. Again, I really wanted to compliment everyone who participated in pulling this off. It was a large effort, and there was a very high level of participation and concern from families. And I know in the past meetings, Ms. Trebisoni has been, excellent trying to talk to some of these items, but I just wanted to give the whole summary for the school committee and share that. And Ms. Norman, if there's anything that you want to add, because you participated in the event as well.
No, I think it was very thorough, but I will say, I mean, as we are, other people had said earlier, is what are the sort of the, I don't want to be Pollyannish, the upside of COVID, but the participation at the CPAC meetings, as we've seen, and school committee meetings and other public forums have dramatically increased. I mean, obviously we're in a crisis, and families, the need for information is greater and the need for advocacy is greater, but it's also, the numbers are much higher. And so I really want to thank the leadership at the CPAC, also supported by Ms. Trebisoni, for making that happen. Director Trebisoni, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to expand a little bit, if you don't mind. Thank you for that summary, Laura. It was right on, but just again, we've already been reaching out to families, since we started. Special educators, the teams have been great, and I think that's really helped. Part of those conversations are, what are the things that your child struggled with? What are the things that we want to make sure that are in place? Those were conversations and expectations that weren't there in the spring. And that's helping us to plan, how do you support students who may need some more executive functioning or check-in? We're working very closely with our paraprofessionals to really wrap around the team. And so I think those conversations, through those conversations, are where we're writing the learning plans. How will it be best for this child to learn to access what they need? And so that's how the plans are being written. And so I think that that's been a great opportunity so far. I think the parent engagement, the CPAC meetings have been great. But also part of the learning plan is parent engagement. How are we going to engage with parents? Not just having office hours that someone can drop in. What we really found helpful was having some parent coaching sessions, especially for our students who really struggle, where they had allotted times in the schedule where they would be meeting with teachers to coach, and the team would do that. There would be a BCBA as part of that, a speech and language pathologist, or it was to really wrap around and work with the parent and the child together to coach how to apply those activities at home. And so that's been continuing to happen. I've also reached out to the Multilingual Center and SFLC, and I'm going to start to do my own coffee talk, similar to the Multilingual Town Hall, but a little bit different, where I would be meeting one evening with parents whose primary language is Spanish, another evening with parents whose primary language is Portuguese. So it's not just going through interpreters, but it's really in their language, but I'm there to facilitate conversation with them. Really not to present a PowerPoint, but I'm calling it a coffee hour about really, what's going on? How can I help you? What are the conversations that are important to you? Always just trying to think of oftentimes when we run something, we're running it through my white middle class brain, and I want to work it through how parents need it. And I think that the work in supporting community schools, we had talked about it before, but we're really happy to say that we've built a partnership with Kevin Russo, as many of you know from Arise, and that I've been able to facilitate that with Rosanna, and that we'll be having ABA specialists as one-to-ones working with some students with more significant needs, and also BCBA consultation. So that's something that Rosanna and I and Kevin have been doing over the last couple of days. So we've really been trying to wrap around that. We have a lot to do, and we want to get in and see the kids too. You know, that's our ultimate dream. But we have been testing. We've tested at least 10 kids a week so far. I think what I didn't say is that we also I contracted with an agency for an occupational therapist and a speech and language therapist, at least for 3 months for 30 hours a week, to really get us ahead in some of the testing that we need to do, because I want speech and language pathologists and occupational therapists to be focused on providing instruction to our students, not to be worried about testing. I'm not going to say IEP meetings are going to be an issue, because we're going to have to go in and out for IEP meetings, but you know, and what we really want to do is get the students in, be working with the students, collect the data, and then start to hold meetings with parents to really talk about how are students progressing. Is there any services that we really need to look at, or ways that we could help for any missed lessons or instruction that happen? We really want to get the students in. We really want to spend some time with them, whether it's remotely or hybrid or whatever we can do. So thank you.
And just to be clear, when you use the term testing, you're not talking about COVID testing, you're talking about evaluation for progress and need of services. Yes.
Right. Focusing on, particularly right this minute, our students who are turning 3, early intervention will provide services until October 15th. So we want to make sure that every student who would be turning 3 has been evaluated and determined whether they're eligible for special education services, initials, and we go from there. So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, and thank you, Ms. Batone, for that report. We will go on back to item number 4, unfinished business, which is Somerville Public School Policy Manual. The following policies being presented this evening for a second reading as amended, which is JLCB, the immunization policy. Is there, I don't know if Dr. Ackman, as the chair of, I'm really tired. Okay, chair of rules, or if there's someone from Central who would want to speak to how it was amended or to this policy, Dr. Ackman?
I can't speak to how it was amended. I can speak to what passed out of rules.
That would be helpful to frame it. Thank you.
Sure. The policy that passed out of rules, that happened before the governor handed down an immunization policy. And I think after rules, it was passed out of rules, made sure that, you know, our language was in line with the, you know, the governor's language and is pursuant to that. And the short of this policy is that you have to have a flu shot if you want to enter Somerville Public Schools, and the counter to that is that the city and district will commit to providing free flu shots for everyone.
Thank you for that. I just lost my whole train of thought. Yes. So I also, if anyone in the audience is interested, under the handouts, I also, Ms. Santiago posted, it's the new listing of all the vaccines that are now, that the state now requires you to be able to have before you can enter a public school. I think we are all set because there is the whole language from the Department of Health is in there. Mr. Green?
This is mostly a question on behalf of the people watching at home, I think. Just to clarify the process, when it was brought to us last week, the lawyers hadn't looked at it yet. So I assume whatever edits have been made were made in conjunction with legal review. Is that correct? And if so, are any of them substantive or is just legalese language?
To be honest with you, I don't know that Attorney Long was able to review it. He was in negotiations pretty heavily last week in many other districts. So I can check with him in the morning, but I'm not sure that he actually was able to review it unless Dr. Ackman has an update different from that. My guess is that he did not.
Okay.
That is also my update. I've been trying to track him down on a few issues and have yet to hear back from him.
Mr. Green? I can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, there we go. The reason I asked is because I don't actually see any real differences between second reading and first reading language. And so when you say it's amended, I was confused, but.
Yes, and I didn't, that was, what I would like to do is to put this off until the next agenda to make sure that it is all, I had the same experience when I read it this afternoon and I didn't see it. So thank you for highlighting that. And what I will do is, what's the technical term here? Are we tabling it? We're tabling it to the next. Okay, so we're going to table this policy. We will now move on to item number 7, new business. We are now on to donations. Can I get a motion on the donations?
This is Laura. Motion to approve based on the recommendation from the superintendent to recommend with gratitude the following donations. The grant from the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute for $700, the Bar Foundation for $550,000 for Next Wave and Engage New England, the Popplestone Foundation for $20,000 for SFLC Parent Child Services, and the Mass Foundation for Humanities and Public Policy for $1,581.30 for Scale.
Is there a
It's
second?
Alana, second.
There's a motion by Ms. Patone, seconded by Ms. Krepchin. Is there any discussion? Mr. Green.
So for most of the grants, I would love to just get an understanding of where they came from in a memo at some point, because they seem random and from weird places. I'd love to know more about how they came about. But I think for the people who haven't been following this, just a minute or two about how we got $550,000 from Bar Foundation makes sense.
Sure. So through you, Madam Chair. So both Full Circle Next Wave and Somerville High School both were recipients initially of the BAR grants, planning grants for Engage New England. Both grants are around restructuring, inclusive learning, making sure that this project-based with student engagement sort of being the center of the feature. Both were given planning grants 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Full Circle Next Wave 2 years ago. And then based on the planning grant work, each school had to submit a full proposal for how they would execute the work that they were proposing to do. So in the case of Somerville High School, this went really along the lines of the ed plan for the new high school. In the case of Full Circle Next Wave, this really was around rethinking Full Circle Next Wave's delivery of education as both an alternative and a therapeutic site to be able to really engage in project-based learning and applied learning for students out in the community and sort of bring to fruition what is a 6 to 12 school. So we were thrilled that that proposal was accepted and supported as part of this implementation grant with Engage New England.
Thank you so much. And kudos to the staff Next Wave Full Circle for continuing to reinvent and to care deeply about their students, and while juggling all of the other things that we all are. It is remarkable. And after we've had a moment to catch our breaths, I would love to have the staff of Next Wave Full Circle come and present where they are in their work in progress. So
Absolutely.
with that, there's a motion by Ms. Fatone, seconded by Ms. Krepchen. Can I get a roll call vote on the approval of donations, please?
Sure. Mr. Green,
Yes.
Woman,
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Exception,
Yes.
Barish,
Yes.
Dr. Phillips,
Yes.
President McLaughlin,
Yes.
Ms. Batone,
Yes.
Mayor Curtatone. Motion carries.
Thank you so much. The next item is items from board members. Does anyone have any items tonight? Dr. Ackman, do you have condolences tonight?
Yes. The Somerville School Committee extends its, sorry, Ms. Barish, did you have something to say before I do condolences?
Oh,
Sorry, Chair Norman, Ms. Barish had something to say.
thank you so much, Ms. Barish. Thank you for catching that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ackerman, or Dr. Ackerman, sorry, Ackerman. It's been a long day, right? And thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on something that is months old. During the winter, Ms. Batone proposed a revision of policy GBBAR, gender identity support for staff. And I just wanted to let everyone know that I've reworked the language and included feedback from the Department of Health and Human Services. And I look forward to sharing the reworked language with my colleagues whenever the agenda allows.
And just refresh my memory, was this something that was going to go back to rules, or we were going to consider it? We're considering it at the full, so I will get it on an agenda. Thank you so much, Ms. Barish, for doing that work.
Thank you, Dr. Ackerman, for pointing out my question.
Gladly, we're a team.
Takes a village to run a meeting.
Yeah.
All right. With that, Dr. Ackman, condolences.
Thank you. The Somerville School Committee would like to extend its deepest condolences to the families of Mary Harris, former director of the Foster Grandparents Program for Catholic Charities, and Julia DePasquale, mom to Patricia DePasquale, Kennedy School paraprofessional, and Julie Casper, Brown School teacher, former school committee member and PTA president at Powderhouse School, retired city employee, worked as assistant to former Mayor Dorothy Kelly Gay, and later in the Treasurer's Department at City Hall.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Go to bed.
Night.